Yo, what's up, YouTube? We got Candace Owens versus 20 Feminists. So, look, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. We about to get right into this. Let's get it.
Women, they don't want to stay at home when you pull them. They just want flexible working hours and flexible working conditions like you have. And I think we should all advocate for that. It's not one or the other. But when you sit here and you go, you'll be more fulfilled doing this, then spend all your time doing that. We would love for you to leave the public eye and go focus on what makes you fulfilled.
Okay. Hi, my name is Candace Owens. I am a podcaster, a mother, a wife, and also the author of the upcoming book, Make Him a Sandwich. And today I am surrounded by 20 feminists.
This is about to get spicy. Lock in.
My first claim is that the sexual revolution has devalued women and made them infinitely less happy. Hello. Hi.
Hi, I'm Samaya.
Samaya, nice to meet you. I'm Candace.
Nice to meet you too. So my question for you is, statistics show that 60% of women who are murdered by their intimate partners, murdered by someone that they are in close relations with. That's according to the UN from 2023.
Yeah.
So how is it that, women are so valued, quote unquote, in the home, and yet that's the place where they're at the most danger?
Okay, so I'm not sure what that has to do with the sexual revolution.
What that has to do with the revolution? Let's see.
Right, the sexual revolution.
The first claim.
The sexual revolution gave.
I'm happy to answer it. I'm just saying that, if you broaden that statistic, you are more likely in general just to be murdered by somebody you know. So, of course.
But men are much less likely to be murdered by, their
That's not
partners.
true.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm sure, because men are less likely to be murdered by women. Full stop. Exactly. So that statistic makes sense to me. I'm still not sure how this correlates to whether or not the sexual revolution
increased women's ability to leave the house, women's ability to control their own reproductive capabilities, women's ability to, control their own capacity within the workforce in regards to their own sexual capacity. So it is the very fact that the sexual revolution happened that made our access to the workplace much more, or just the public sphere in general, much more easy. So without the sexual revolution, women would be much more confined to the place where they're at the most danger. Isn't that true?
So you think?
So, ladies, would you rather be a stay-at-home mom, work at home, or kind of work in corporate America, do to be your own boss, independent type thing, like she's talking?
That, just so I'm trying to understand your argument here, you think that if we didn't have the sexual revolution, less women or more women would be murdered? Are you saying that women are
more women would be murdered, for sure?
Okay, I disagree with that. I still don't think it has anything to do with the claim that women are infinitely less happy because of the sexual revolution, which has devalued women.
I think you'd probably be less happy if you're being murdered.
Oh.
Anyone disagree?
Okay, yeah, I don't, okay. Okay. There is definitely a correlation between personal relationships and domestic violence. And just to be clear, if we're talking about just a monogamous relationships, the most violent relationships that are on the books are between lesbian partners. Yes, when people are intimate,
that's not
Oh, you see that? Fact check.
That is actually true.
No, the statistic you're talking about is people who have faced domestic violence. Lesbians, yes, are more likely to have faced domestic violence, but that's because they typically came from relationships with men in which they were mistreated.
Lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships that we have on the books.
But we can move on.
They can fact check that claim. The point being is that it's not exactly a stunning statistic to say that when people are in relationships, period, whether those relationships are homosexual, whether they're married,
but you're saying that the sexual revolution.
Let me finish. I've let you try to explain how this is correlated to happiness, and I don't think it does. I actually think you're having a different debate right now. But yes, absolutely, it makes perfect sense that you are more likely in general when you are in a relationship, because people are driven by anger by people that they know, whether or not we're talking about boyfriend and girlfriend, a husband and a wife, a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife. Yes, of course, the instances of domestic violence are going to take place when you're inside of a home. But the sexual revolution, encouraging women to give up their goods for free, which is what I'm speaking about, and encouraging men not to marry these women or to have long-term relationships, what I am saying is a direct contributor to their unhappiness, because women are giving up their goods for free and women are now entering the workplace, and that does not actually make them happy.
Okay, pause. Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Uh-oh.
Hello.
Hi there.
How are you? I'm Candace.
Nice to meet you. Julian. My pronouns are they, them. It's very interesting to think of it when we just think about the gender binary. It's, how do we place value on human beings in general? And so when we think about, placing value, that comes from a place of power, right? So I think let's select like the Victorian era. You have this dominant group of people coming from white supremacy, deciding who gets to have a proper status in the world. And so that is already like taking human beings and devaluing them. And so what the sexual revolution did was to help people seek out empowerment, which increased value, no matter the gender. So when it comes to sexual revolution, let's look at one contribution is sex education. I'm actually an educator. I teach sociology and LGBTQ studies. And I have absolutely seen the positive outcome with the sexual revolution and sex education and seen people empower themselves. And with that comes safety when it comes to decreasing STIs, abuse, sexual assault. Again, people get to empower themselves of all genders. And I know earlier you mentioned about violence amongst lesbians and sapphic community, which I do identify within. All genders can be subjected to violence.
That was the point I was making.
Yeah, like any gender, no matter what, could be subjected to violence. Man, woman, it's not, yeah.
So I wasn't sure of how her claim was relating to what we were talking about, whether or not it makes people happy or unhappy. Relationships are obviously a ground where there can be violence.
I guess I could just wrap it up by saying, like, if we all have access to like sex education through the incredible work of feminists through the sexual revolution, we are able to gain access to information and gain skills to create an equitable society, egalitarian within our relationships, whether it be platonic or romantic. I'm so grateful for those feminists who have fought for us, so we can gain those spaces and create a healthier society.
Okay, are you a believer in the government doing everything that it can to make people happy?
So when it comes, as someone that teaches in the public sector, I understand the concern when it comes to what is a teacher, what kind of information they're providing to the students. I do believe that we, as a teacher, I should be able to give that sort of information. Again, I teach college students. One of my claims is I believe that we should mandate sex education amongst college students. So yes, I do want the state, I would like the government to give us those resources so we can implement that curriculum.
Okay, you consider yourself a feminist, I'm assuming?
Queer feminist. There's variations, right?
What is a queer feminist as opposed to a feminist, just so I understand?
Why she's smiling?
Well, so I heavily believe in queer theory. So, the gender binary that we understand, it comes from colonization. So someone who is mixed race, family from Mexico, we have the Muxés in Mexico, which is an indigenous tribe. They believed in gender fluidity. And then you have European colonizers coming who dismantle that. And now everything that we understand when it comes to gender is a Western lens. So from a queer...
So you don't even think women exist, I'm guessing.
I think everyone should be empowered to figure out their identity and explore the language that best describes themselves. So freedom, America, right? America, freedom. And I want to believe in that when it comes to identity. Right. Everyone should have the freedom to decide how they want to identify, as long as they're not causing harm. But that's where we get into the debate, what is harm?
So just, again, to be clear, to go back to this claim, we are debating female happiness. You are saying you do not identify as a female.
I identify with all gender expressions, so from masculinity to femininity. So
I'm just saying, are you just saying that as a part of queer theory, you're debating whether or not women are happier after the sexual revolution? I'm just trying to understand, because it seems like you're debating queer theory as opposed to female.
I believe all genders benefit from the sexual revolution.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
I didn't really get her argument right there, but...
Hello.
I'm Zena.
Zena. Very much like your name.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Can we start with the beginning? Do you identify as a female?
I identify as a woman, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Right. So I do want to like get back to your premise. You're saying that women have been devalued, right, by the sexual revolution. This like kind of presumes two things. One, that there has been a loss of worth, right, for women. So you're saying that women have, as human beings, lost worth. Women who, prior to their sexual revolution, were worth more than women today.
I would say that, yes, women have devalued themselves by becoming overtly
According to
sexual. That's my claim. So, I mean, also according to just, and let's not remove this from the other part of the claim, which that it has made women infinitely less happy.
Right. So are you saying, but you're saying that according to you, women have been devalued?
Not according to me. According to the time in which people are getting married, how difficult it is for people to find a partner that's willing to commit to them. And I think that's in large part due to the fact that women are offering sex for free, because it was a major component of the sexual revolution was this idea.
So a woman's worth is tied to her sexuality?
It's not tied to, well, absolutely. If you're going to be having multiple partners, you are going to be devaluing yourself.
You're worth less as a human being?
Not as a human being, just...
You know what? I feel like a lot of women nowadays are devaluing themselves from like the OnlyFans, like the posting their bodies, what they wearing and stuff like that. Like, yeah, the sexual revolution really influenced that on women. So like, yeah.
In terms of trying to have a partnership and a productive relationship, certainly men are not going to be clamoring to have a relationship with somebody when the market is growing them.
A man's response to your actions is what defines your worth, right?
Yeah, well, I would say that I would argue that what makes women actually happy is family. So if you're interrupting, so just to connect the dots for you, when women are having sex with multiple partners, it devalues them for men, right?
For men. So,
yes, so
men define a woman's worth.
Well, I would say both of them kind of define one another's worth, because I think the ultimate goal for people to be happy is actually family.
Okay, so you're saying...
Yeah, if you're a woman and you're sleeping with multiple men, you're devaluing yourself, and then you want to build a family. By the time you find that man, he don't want you because you devalue yourself. You did everything in a book. You treat yourself with no self-worth.
Not worth.
In all cases, a woman is going to be more fulfilled in regards to family.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And this is going to work in all cases. You're saying
that's the key. Get a family, get married, live a dream.
And there's no individual case in which a woman can feel, fulfilled without being tied to other people in the case of family.
I think there could be an exceptional case for everything. I think there are exceptional cases, but I think that if we all start trying to be the exception as opposed to recognizing the rule, which is that people in life are more fulfilled when they achieve a family unit and when they have children, women in particular, especially aspiring to children, then you are going to end up with a bunch of people who are unhappy because your job cannot replace the feeling of having a family.
So what you're saying is we need to look at every individual case and see what is going to fulfill you or what is going to, I guess, essentially predict your happiness more. Because if we look at, for example, the Nordic countries, right? These are countries, I'm talking about like Sweden, Denmark, right? These countries tend to be like, I think in the past 14 years, they've been ranked as the highest in happiness and marital satisfaction from women, right? And we see that they also have been the most open in regards to like, sexual norms and sexual roles, right? So, and we also see that there's less rates of like STDs reported. We see more, and that's also due to comprehensive sex education that's pushed in those countries. So we see that when and that's like a direct result of the sexual revolution, right? So when we're seeing that direct reports of happiness, right, we don't have these same rates in America. In these countries that are more sexually open, why would we see like those rates in those type of countries?
So I think you might be referring to this sort of mass-produced study that was a part of like a behavioral science study, which said that women were the happiest women in the world were women that were actually unmarried and had careers. No. Okay. Well, there was
reported happiness.
Okay, sure. I'm talking about the same thing. It was reported happiness, but it could be there's tons of studies. The point being is that in 2023, there was this massive scandal where they recognize that a lot of these studies that were being produced, behavioral science, was proven to be a complete fraud. And they were unable to reproduce these studies, and they also found that the data had been faked. The data that we can look at that I think shows, and you can let me know if you agree with this, if women, and under the imagination of the feminist umbrella, were really unhappy when they were in the home, and then entering the workforce has made women happier and infinitely feeling more secure about themselves, we could, I think, reasonably expect that there would have been a decrease in suicide rates amongst women?
You would have to go ahead and show how that correlation, right, is going to be a direct cause of women going into the workforce.
Okay, well, how can we, let's measure, then you have to give me a way that we can measure happiness. How can we measure happiness? So I would say suicide rates would be a good thing to look at. Drug, alcohol consumption would be a good thing to look at.
Of course, right? But we would have to, we can say, I can say at this point in society, I don't think everyone is happy. I think there's a lot of things that we need to reconcile in society.
That's what I'm getting at.
I wonder, how do they even do these behavior studies on these certain groups, like taking these certain groups, like what data do they look at to determine these certain points, like within those certain groups that they talking about, like?
Right,
So
but we have to look at the cause, right? Why are these things predicted, right? And for example, if we talk about men, there are a lot of things we can look at, right? That tend to predetermine suicide, right? But we can't say, oh, these two things are happening at the same time. This caused this other thing.
Yes, that's right. But I do think that we can objectively say that women who are committing suicide rates more than they were in the 1950s, like it has actually increased marginally. That's not a sign that us entering the workforce suddenly made us all very happy.
How is it a cause of the workforce?
We're also binge drinking at a higher rate.
How's this
We're
cause of
opioids at a higher rate?
How is this a cause of entering
Because
the
I
workforce?
think women are being put on a pathway aspirationally.
But you're gonna have to. You're saying you think this, right? But where's the cause? Like you're not substantiating the claim. You're saying this is what I think. I'm seeing two.
Okay, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your
Dang,
seat.
she out of here.
Great job. Great job.
It's a great job.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, I'm Nikki.
Nice to meet you.
So when we're talking about the value of women on a societal scale and how we view each other, right? When you're devaluing us, you're objectifying us. And follow me, I promise. But
Objectifying how?
rape rates have gone down by about half in the last 20 years, right? So if you're saying we're less valuable now, why wouldn't we be suffering at a higher rate?
So is the argument that you're making, just so I understand, that because women are giving up sex for free, they're not being raped?
Every study shows rape is not correlated with just sexual gratification. It is a power structure.
Okay.
So it is about objectifying and abusing women when you rape them, not about whether or not you want sex. What I am saying is that women are less objectified, so therefore we are being raped less.
Okay, so you think that in today's society, because this is pretty wild for me. In the 1950s, you're saying women were more objectified than today in the land of OnlyFans, the Kardashian clan, and women that are essentially putting up their boobs and butts for free on Instagram. You're saying we finally have achieved less objectification, where women can't even get onto an advertising. You can't even advertise a bag without them having to be naked in order for them to get a...
Now, the 1950s woman versus today's time of the OnlyFans girls and the half-naked girls. Of course, these days and times, they're going to get objectified more than 1950. 1950, they was wearing long dresses, covered up. Like, they was just super covered and they was just in the house all day. Like, especially what Candace Owens says with these ads and stuff like that. You can't promote a Birkin bag without a model half naked. Like, come on, man.
career as a model, you're saying, oh, great, we've achieved actually less objectification.
So I'm not trying to suggest that I think that the over-commodification of women's bodies is positive. But what I am saying is that when you're going to the 1950s, that we shouldn't put this glazed look of, oh, it was so happy, we had single income households and we got to stay home. We also had a pill popping problem. We also were viewed as maids. Like, we were seen as a house appliance far more than we were as people. And so when you have that kind of objectification where you are in a...
But you know what I feel like? I feel like in today's time, the American dream for a woman, they want to stay home. They don't want to work. Like, a lot of women don't want to go in the workforce because it's stressful for them. They coming home, they got to support and take care of a family. You know, a lot of women don't want to hold that responsibility. You know, that usually is a man's responsibility. I'm not saying a woman can't go to work. I'm not saying a woman can't help, but at the same time, you know, there's a certain role for, like, a man, in a sense.
a subservient position. I think we're facing a different form today, but I think that rape is a signifier of a contradiction to your statement.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense, but I do want to rebut it on a couple of points. So first, I just want to say, suggesting that objectification has gone downward since the 1950s is wild. That's just a firm no. That is not the truth, and you know that's not true.
Wait, so do you feel like
hold on, let me answer your
like,
second thing.
okay.
Second thing, you then brought up, okay, women were at home, but they were pill popping. Well, you then have to acknowledge we're actually popping more pills now, right? So we have actually increased our amount of pill popping. Women are having overdoses on opioids. And on top of that, since I think 1999, by rate, we are increasing our opioid use compared to men. So women are not popping pills less because we're going into the workforce. That's actually not true at all either. We're also, like I said to you, consuming alcohol more and binge drinking more than we did in the 1950s, which is why I was trying to get her to say, we need to look at actually give me any reasonable metric of how we can define happiness. Because it's hard, right? Are you happy, yes or no?
Sure, but wait, hold on. We're actually avoiding what my original point was about rape being the signifier.
Okay, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
She's
Thank
outta
you.
here.
Nice to meet you.
Hold up, because we gotta skip to the best part. Let me see. If we could get to the part that everyone wants to see. Did we get, hold up. Give me a second. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is the highlight right here. That's it. There we go. All right, let's get into this.
That just really doesn't bear out when you look at the stats, when you look at how working mothers are way less likely to be in poverty. Maternal education is the #1 predictor of childhood outcomes, better scores, getting higher incomes in the future, fewer behavioral problems, better mental health. So it's weird to me and college educated women are least likely to get divorced. And they're the only women, the top 10% of women are the only women whose marriage rates are going up. So they're getting married, they're staying married, and their kids are doing better. When you look at stay-at-home mothers, you see that they're more likely to report being depressed, they're more likely to report having anxiety and anger and all these types of things. So how can you say that? Seems like a woman, if you want to get married and have kids, you should go to college and have a career.
So it sounds to me like we are looking at totally different statistics because everything that you said, I've actually read the exact opposite.
I'm glad we're on a fact check show with you.
Right, exactly.
Oh, it's so exciting.
That's going to be amazing. Okay, because I know, like I said, I think what we're talking about is that there was this widespread report on female happiness, and I know that it was formally debunked, and it was
That's not what I'm talking about. Pew Research,
Right.
University of
Okay.
California. In fact, working mothers today spend more time with their children than women did in the 1960s that were at home.
Okay, well,
Wait. How can you spend more time with your children if you work than mothers that stay at home in the 1950s? That's all they did, stay at home. What you mean you can't spend time with your children?
women that are at home are obviously spending more time with their
Right, it's
children than the
obvious.
people who are at work.
And their
today.
children are not faring off any better,
Right.
and they're faring off worse.
How are you measuring their children faring off worse?
How likely they
How are you measuring this behavior, though?
are to higher incomes, better scores, fewer health problems, fewer behavioral issues, and better mental.
So the just to get back to the claim that I'm making here is that it is obvious that women who have children are going to be more fulfilled.
How is
right?
that obvious? Because you said so?
No, it's not obvious because I said so. It's because when you look at all the statistics in terms of women who are choosing not to have families, they are, as the person who just sat here before you mentioned, they are suffering from more depression. They're suffering from more anxiety. And
that's not true.
Okay, it is true. It is actually true that women who are choosing their careers over starting families are finding themselves leaning more onto medicines like Xanax, anxiety-inducing medicines, and depression because they suspended.
So, do you think women who chooses career over family are more depressed or got more anxiety, in a sense, like Candace is saying? And this fact check right here says the CDC data shows that from 2015 to 2018, women were more than twice as likely to take antidepressants than men, and antidepressant use was more common among those who chose college degrees. So, people in the working class that are women were on antidepressants.
to medicines like Xanax, anxiety-inducing medicines, and depression because they suspended that time frame where women really should be looking to find a partner and to start a family because they were instead pursuing their careers.
And why are they better off?
It is a dishonest, it is totally a dishonest narrative that men and women want the same things out of life. We don't. We absolutely do not want.
All right, I'm ending it off right here. Like, comment, subscribe. If y'all want part 2, you know what I mean? Go watch my last video. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. We about to be out. Peace.